The old man's hands trembled as he leaned on his cane, the weight of 85 years pressing harder than the autumn wind cutting through the empty parking lot. Walter Grayson, a Korean War veteran, stood outside the small-town diner, his faded army cap tilted slightly, the eagle pin glinting faintly under the streetlight. He'd come here every Thursday for 20 years, not for the coffee, though it was decent, but for the memories. This was where he'd met his wife, Ellen, 6 decades ago, where they'd laughed over cherry pie and dreamed of a life together. Now, with Ellen gone, these visits were his tether to her, to a world that still made sense. But tonight, something felt off. The air carried a restless edge, and Walter's instincts, honed by years in foxholes, prickled. He didn't see the biker until it was too late. The roar of a motorcycle split the quiet, and a hulking figure in a leather jacket dismounted, his boots crunching gravel. The man, mid-30s, with a shaved head and a skull carved deep, stormed toward Walter. "Move it, old man," he spat, shoving past. Walter stumbled, his cane clattering to the ground. He reached for it, slow but steady, when the biker spun back, eyes blazing. "You deaf? I said move." Before Walter could respond, a fist crashed into his jaw. Pain exploded, and he crumpled, blood trickling from his lip. The biker loomed over him, muttering curses, then kicked the cane into the gutter and roared off on his bike. Walter lay there, the cold pavement biting into his palms, his heart pounding not with fear but with a quiet, stubborn resolve. He'd faced worse than this. He'd survive inside the diner. A waitress named Maria, barely 20, saw it all through the window. She rushed out, her apron flapping, and knelt beside Walter. "Mr. Grayson, oh my God, are you okay?" Her voice trembled as she helped him sit up, her hands gentle but firm. Walter managed a weak smile, his eyes crinkling despite the pain. "Takes more than a punk to keep me down, kid." Maria's heart ached. She knew Walter's story, everyone in town did. The medals, the sacrifice, the way he still tipped generously on his fixed income, always asking about her college dreams. She helped him inside, pressing a damp cloth to his swelling cheek, her mind racing. "We need to call the police," she said, but Walter shook his head. "No fuss, Maria. Just get me my coffee." His voice was steady, but his eyes held a flicker of something deeper, hurt, not from the punch, but from the indignity across town. The biker, whose name was Jace, pulled into a rundown bar, his knuckles still stinging. He wasn't proud of what he'd done, but he wasn't sorry either. Life had been a meat grinder lately, job gone, girlfriend left, bills piling up. Hitting an old man wasn't the plan, but the guy had been in his way, a symbol of everything Jace couldn't stand. Weakness, age, a world that didn't care if he sank or swam. He downed a shot of whiskey, trying to drown the image of the old man's face, those clear blue eyes that didn't flinch even as the fist landed. Jace shook it off. He'd be gone by morning, another town, another chance to outrun himself. Meanwhile, Maria ignored Walter's protests and called the sheriff, who arrived in minutes, taking a statement with a grim nod. But it was another call she made that set the real wheels in motion. Walter's son, Colonel Daniel Grayson, was stationed at a nearby military base, a man whose name carried weight in both military circles and his father's stories. Maria had met him once, when he'd visited Walter at the diner, his uniform crisp, his handshake warm. She found his number in Walter's old address book, left behind on the counter one night, and dialed. "Colonel Grayson? It's Maria from the diner. Your dad's been hurt." Her voice cracked, but she pushed through, recounting the attack. On the other end, Daniel's silence was a storm gathering. "I'm coming," he said, his tone like steel. "And I'm bringing help." 30 minutes later, the diner's parking lot hummed with a different kind of energy. 3 military Humvees rolled in, their engines low and deliberate. Colonel Daniel Grayson stepped out, his face a mask of controlled fury, his uniform stark against the neon glow of the diner's sign. Behind him, a small strike team, 6 soldiers, each hand-picked for loyalty and skill, fanned out, their presence commanding but disciplined. Maria, standing at the door, felt her breath catch. This wasn't just a son rushing to his father's side, this was a mission. Daniel strode inside, his eyes locking onto Walter, who sat sipping coffee, his bruised face lit by the diner's warm light. "Dad," Daniel said, kneeling beside him, his voice softening. "Why didn't you call me?" Walter chuckled, wincing slightly. didn't want to bother you, son. You've got wars to fight." But Daniel's jaw tightened. He'd spent years hearing his father downplay his own pain, his own worth. Walter had stormed beaches, saved lives, and come home to a quiet life of kindness, never asking for recognition. To see him bloodied, humiliated, it lit a fire in Daniel's chest. He stood, turning to his team. "Find the guy. Leather jacket, motorcycle, shaved head. He's not far." The soldiers nodded, moving with precision, but Daniel's mission wasn't vengeance. It was something bigger, something his father had taught him, justice tempered with mercy. Jace, oblivious, was still at the bar, nursing his second drink when the door swung open. Two soldiers stepped in, their presence sucking the air from the room. The bartender froze, and Jace's stomach dropped. "Jason J. Miller," one soldier asked, reading from a tablet. Jace's eyes darted to the exit, but another soldier blocked it. "You're coming with us," the first said, not a request. Jace considered running, but the weight of those stairs pinned him. He nodded, numb, and followed them out to a Humvee. The ride was silent, the soldiers' faces unreadable. Jace's mind raced. Jail, a beating, worse? He didn't know what was coming, but he knew he'd crossed a line. Back at the diner, Walter watched the Humvee's return, his brow furrowing as Jace was led inside, hands uncuffed but head bowed. The biker looked smaller now, stripped of his bravado. Daniel stood beside his father, his hand on Walter's shoulder. "This him?" Daniel asked. Walter nodded, his eyes meeting Jace's. For a moment, the diner was silent, the weight of that gaze heavy. Jace expected rage, maybe a fist in return, but Walter's voice was calm. "Why'd you do it, son?" The word son hit Jace like a slap. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. The truth was too raw. He was angry, lost, lashing out at a world that felt unfair. Walter saw it, the way he'd seen fear in young soldiers decades ago. "I'm sorry," Jace mumbled, barely audible. It wasn't enough, and he knew it. Walter leaned forward, his voice steady. "You think you're the only one who's ever been knocked down by life? I was your age once, kid. Fought in a war, lost friends, came home to nothing but a promise to keep going. You don't fix your pain by breaking someone else." Jace's eyes stung, and he looked away, unable to hold that gaze. Daniel stepped forward, his voice low but firm. "You hit my father, a man who's given more than you'll ever know. But he's not pressing charges. Not yet. You've got a choice now." The choice wasn't what Jace expected. Daniel didn't call the sheriff or demand jail time. Instead, he handed Jace a card with an address. "This is a Veterans Outreach Center," Daniel said. "They help people like you, people who've lost their way. Show up tomorrow, 8 a.m. sharp, or I'll find you again." Jace stared at the card, his hands shaking. It wasn't just a way out, it was a lifeline. He nodded, unable to speak, and the soldiers escorted him out, leaving him to ride off into the night, the card clutched in his pocket inside the diner. Maria watched Walter, expecting anger or relief, but he just sipped his coffee, his eyes distant. "Why'd you let him go, Mr. Grayson?" she asked. Walter smiled, a small, knowing curve of his lips. "Because I've seen too many boys like him angry, lost, thinking the world's against them. Sometimes, all it takes is someone believing they can be better." Maria's eyes welled up. She thought of her own struggles, the nights she doubted her dreams, and how Walter's quiet kindness, his tips, his stories had kept her going. She realized then that this wasn't just about Jace or Walter, it was about the ripple of compassion, how one act could change everything. Daniel sat beside his father, his anger softening into pride. He'd come ready to protect, to punish, but Walter had reminded him of a deeper truth: strength isn't just in fighting. It's in forgiving, in offering a hand to someone who's fallen. The soldiers, still outside, watched the scene through the window, their faces softening. They'd seen war, loss, but tonight, they saw something else, a reminder of why they served, why they fought for a world where kindness could still win. As the night settled, Walter stood, a little wobbly but unbowed, and left a generous tip on the table. "For your college fund," he said to Maria, winking despite the bruise. She hugged him, tears spilling, and Daniel walked him to the Humvee, the strike team saluting as they passed. Walter waved them off, embarrassed but proud. "Just get me home, Danny," he said. "Ellen's waiting in my dreams." The next morning, Jace stood outside the Veterans Center, the card crumpled in his hand. He almost didn't come, but something, maybe Walter's eyes, maybe the weight of that word son, pulled him there. He walked inside, and a counselor greeted him, not with judgment but with a handshake. "Let's start fresh," the man said. Jace nodded, a spark of hope flickering where anger once burned. Back in the diner, Maria pinned a new photo to the wall, one she'd snapped of Walter and Daniel laughing over pie. Below it, she wrote, "Heroes don't just fight wars. They build bridges." The townsfolk noticed, and soon, stories of Walter's kindness spread, inspiring small acts, a neighbor helping another, a stranger paying for a meal. The ripple grew, touching lives far beyond that parking lot. And Walter? He kept coming to the diner every Thursday, his cane steady, his smile brighter. He'd faced a fist and chosen forgiveness, proving that the greatest battles are won not with force but with heart. In a world that often felt fractured, Walter Grayson's quiet courage reminded everyone that one act of compassion could light up the dark, binding us all in the unbreakable strength of humanity.